Now, I think the big question facing everybody is, where do we go from here? And broadly, what I'm seeing is that things are being split into kind of two responses. You've got the sort of evolutionary, innovative response, and you've got the more conservative, traditional. I think the evolutionary, innovative response has recognized that the tsunami has flooded in and forever changed the landscape.
Hello, and welcome to the latest in our series of industry deep dives focused on the BPO and contact center space. My name is Gerard Adlam, and I'm delighted to be joined by Chief Customer Officer at ThinScale, Andrew McNeile. Andrew, hello and welcome.
Hi, Ger. Lovely to be with you and looking forward to our conversation.
Andrew, let's dive into it. You work very closely with senior leaders in the contact center and the BPO space. What are some of the key trends that you've observed from working with them, particularly over the last couple of years, and now as we begin to emerge from the pandemic?
Well, I think clearly over the last couple of years, the big issue has been the pandemic and how to overcome that successfully. And everyone has overcome that challenge, but I think with varying degrees of success. Now, I think the big question facing everybody is, where do we go from here? And broadly, what I'm seeing is that things are being split into kind of two responses. You've got the sort of evolutionary, innovative response, and you've got the more conservative, traditional. I think the evolutionary, innovative response has recognized that the tsunami has flooded in and forever changed the landscape, and is effectively recognizing the need to adapt to that, and therefore building a model that is relatively agent-centric and facilitating work from home and looking at how to optimize that model, and at the same time to benefit from the sort of financial improvement, the speed, the efficiency, the logistics, and so on that can bring. The more conservative traditional model is seeking to, I think, go back to where we were before, ignore the fact that the tsunami has taken place, and is having to be rather more authoritarian about it. And I think a couple of recent examples is the pronouncement by the CEO of Goldman Sachs, and indeed the Philippines government, who've mandated that BPO agents should return. The success of these rather forced authoritarian demands that come from multiple sources in a competitive talent market remains to be seen. I anticipate the former, the evolutionary one, is going to turn out to be the much more successful model because at the end of the day, it is agent-centric.
The issues that you just touched upon there with regards to government mandates and indeed the operational decisions to return to the office, ultimately this will impact agent attrition. It will impact the ongoing capacity to attract talent. Contact centers and BPOs, they already recruit huge numbers of agents each year, already a very high rate of turnover and attrition. So from your perspective, from working with the leaders, what are your thoughts on the hiring process as a whole? And are there areas where the situation can be improved at all?
I think talent acquisition is a critical aspect for all BPOs, for all contact centers. And it's a critical driver of cost, particularly when that acquisition is then balanced by attrition. And in the US, currently, over the last 4 to 5 months, the resignation rate is running 50% higher than it was pre-pandemic, or even in the previous couple of years. So this is a huge area of opportunity, I think, for forward-looking BPOs, both in terms of agent experience and in terms of cost reduction. Now, we've got a number of tools for BPOs and contact centers that help optimize and improve that particular flow and integrates into existing HR systems. And anybody who's interested in that can get in touch with us. However, in terms of the opportunities, let's just take one example. Typically, BPOs or contact centers will have to recruit about 1,500 agents in order to get about 1,000 agents into that sort of fully produced, fully operational mode. So the drop-off between recruitment and starting is often majorly contributed to by the length of time that it takes to get people the appropriate equipment and necessary resources to get operational. And in the interim, people can lose enthusiasm. Another opportunity comes along, which is more effective and more efficient, and therefore they will switch jobs, and a variety of other things. But typically people are shipping devices, corporate devices who are operating that model, to all 1,500 people. And so what that means is you're shipping 500 devices to people who will never work for the company. And this is clearly a massive opportunity, both in terms of cost saving for the company's concerned, but also in terms of contributing to the environment, in terms of not shipping things all over the place. Typically, best-in-class recovery rates are somewhere around the 80%. So on top of that, not only have you got the problem of getting them back, but you're also massively increasing that particular area where you're losing devices or getting them broken in the logistics way of doing things. So best-in-class companies these days are closing that gap by allowing agents to use their own personal machine, particularly for that operational phase of getting up and running. Even if a customer will ultimately insist they use a corporate device, you can get them through that window and close the attrition gap by approaching it in this particular way. And the cost reduction and the improvement in agent experience in taking this approach are massive. And we've seen some great examples of companies who have measured the before and after and seen significant improvement. So that's just kind of one example. There are several ways in which actually I think that people can improve what they're doing, and it requires a new way of thinking.
Okay, well, let's unpack that. Let's dig into that a little bit more, this new way of thinking.
Yep.
Where are some of these major opportunities for the senior contact and BPO executives?
Well, I think having spent most of my career in sort of rapid growth, low margin, highly operational tech business, one of the things I was taught during that time was the criticality of the intense focus on the detailed financial and operational metrics. When you're growing rapidly, these are changing very fast. And indeed, the components that you need to focus on are changing fast. So you need to get used to the requirement to change the lens for those particular metrics and ensure that you're keeping pace with the current reality. In my view, this has happened with the pandemic. There's been a seismic shift in how we're all working. There was a whole set of ways of working when you were in a contact center. Now everybody's at home. So the metrics that you could rely on here are going to be different when you move to this model. The previous operating model was shiny, cool, come and work in my shiny call center. I provide you with a desk, a chair, some slides in the office, a nice restaurant, and all the rest of it. Everything is secure and corporate owned and controlled. Now they're at home, and there's a whole new operating model for talent acquisition at home. Do I ship PCs forwards and backwards? What are the logistics and our environmental costs? How do I keep it secure, whether it's a corporate machine or a BYOD machine? How do I deliver the right applications to the right person at the right time in the right place? What is the operational speed of execution how can I execute rapidly, scale rapidly? I think very few have migrated from an in-call call center model to an integrated remote model where they're considering all the component metrics that go to being part of really getting a holistic perspective of the true operational costs of that. An integrated model that considers the integration of talent acquisition, operational efficiency, logistics costs, security, hybrid working. But those companies that have truly moved to a new financial operating model and understood it, those are the companies that are winning.
And I believe that one of the big challenges going forward will be how they begin to untangle themselves from the old way their model was constructed and begin to build organically this new approach, this integrated system, as you call it. What are some of the other key challenges for BPO and contact center leaders? Because ultimately, the danger of not getting this right in this new world is a knock-on detrimental impact to the end customer. And I suppose that's what's at stake here.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest one is the great resignation that is happening at the moment, and the kind of war for talent, as it's sometimes being referred to. So that competition that is out there, as people do evolve their models, and therefore now the competitive playing field suddenly gets leveled again. So the key issues, I think, will be the talent acquisition, attrition rate, security, competitive positioning, profitable growth. There are many challenges in this uncertain and very changed landscape. But without doubt, the biggest one is the competition for talent. I've mentioned that statistic earlier, where it was 50% higher than the current resignation rate in the US is 50% higher, not only than pre-pandemic, but also higher than the rate over the last sort of year and a half. So those that I think who will win this war and respond best to these major challenges will be the ones who put their employees first. Those who have an employee-centric view and value and belief and truly act out that equation that is known to many of us, EX equals CX.
Let's unpack that a little bit more, that equation, EX equals CX. I think we all know, instinctively what you mean by that, but unpack it a little bit more for us and the implications.
Sure. So obviously it stands for employee experience equals customer experience. I think it was the 400,000 employee Danish facility management services company, ISS, who in the 1990s, I think I saw a study of theirs where they had really gone in and dug in and researched this very carefully. And what they had come to the conclusion was that when they were measuring the CX, or the net promoter score, the customer net promoter score of any service that they were offering, there was an extreme correlation to the employee net promoter score of the group of employees that were working on that particular contract. So they highlighted this correlation: the quality of the employee experience equals the quality of the customer experience. And then it got sort of taken on from there. Richard Branson then sort of turned it into the sort of one-line mantra that if I look after my employees, they'll look after my customers. And I think many, and it's kind of emerged from the 1990s into the 2000s as a sort of understood basis of operation. However, I think many executives will happily give a sort of verbal assent to this notion. But when the pressure comes from a senior executive at a customer, then suddenly all the employee consideration goes out of the window. And I think it really got highlighted for me at a recent dinner conversation when I was advocating the benefits of agent centricity, thinking about facilitating. Clearly, a lot more of us want to work at home, et cetera, et cetera. And the response I got from this senior BPO executives was, but my customers want the employees back in the office. As though some executive in this customer could wave a wand, demand that all the employees sort of came back in. So the overriding consideration in his head was the wish of a customer executive, and no consideration given to the employees. Not even an attempt to put out an argument to this executive that actually, in so insisting, he might be degrading the very service that I would be giving to him. And, so actually it's this sort of knee jerk, which actually shows that your underwriting value is not EX equals CX, but simply that whatever I think I have to do for the customer rules the roost. So I think the question will be for many is, what am I actually going to set as the priority here as a senior set of executives? And how am I then going to balance these competing demands from my different stakeholders, whether it's customers, shareholders, and of course, employees.
Let's put some figures on some of the cost savings that you've suggested, Andrew. If executives are able to unshackle themselves, let's say, from doing things the way they've always been done, look at some fresher approaches, what sorts of cost savings can be made in terms of hardware, HR costs, IT hours, etc.?
So I think the key, as always, and this refers back to my point about really looking at the numbers, because every customer is going to be very specific. They're going to have different hardware prices and so on, different numbers of estates. So in every case, the numbers will be different, but it's thinking it through and integrating it. But let's take an example. So let's imagine, for example, that you've got about 1,000 agents that you're typically paying about $500 for a PC, that you amortize that over a 5-year period, that your device recovery rate is about 80%, that you are spending about $50 to ship the machine in each direction, and that you've got a 5 to 8% attrition per month. Then once you multiply all of those kind of areas out, the kind of cost pieces are, there's about 100,000 in device damage and loss that you're going to be spending per annum. In terms of logistics, to ship each way to those agents is going to be about $100,000. In terms of a logistics team that you're going to have to manage it, to inventory them, to make the changes, to wipe them as the machines come back, to make sure they're getting sent out and all the rest of it. Typically, if you average at about $40,000 a head and have a team of 4, that wouldn't be untypical, which again is another $160,000. And as a minimum, you will need probably for that 1,000 agents at least 300 more machines just to service the gaps between coming and going and broken and lost and replaced and etc. So that will be, if you take those 300 machines and just take a 1-year component of your amortization, that would be another $40,000. So if you add that total lot together, you're at approximately $400,000. Now, to operate and on top of that, you're spending $125,000 a year in terms of the amortization, but which you could argue is sort of below the line stuff. And then now typically to move to a BYOD model in terms of the facilities that you will need to execute it, license fees for those who can facilitate it and so on, or our own or whoever, might be in the area of $150,000. So your net saving is going to be something of the order of $350,000. So, that gives you the order of magnitude of impact. And obviously, for those of our customers who have, some of our customers have 200,000 employees or more. And so when you scale that, even take it to 10,000, suddenly you're at 3.5 million. And this then becomes material to the financial impact of the company. And of course, it has the impact in terms of better agent experience, because you can get going from day one, the day you sign the contract, the day you can operate. And equally, from an environmental point of view, many of our customers now want to be having a very clear, positive environmental position. And clearly, buying rapidly obsolescent hardware and shipping it backwards and forwards is not a good contribution to the environment.
Well, that's all we've got time for. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us today. Lots of food for thought, and certainly some operational details to be dug into. Are there any final words that you'd like to leave our listeners and our viewers with?
Well, Ger, I really enjoyed our conversation. It's been really fun to dig into the things that have really stirred me and engaged me over the last couple of years. And I find it really fun to discuss some of these things that I'm seeing across the industry. So if anybody is listening and is finding this really interesting and they'd like to explore some of the themes more, then what I'd suggest is they connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll happily have a discussion with them.